Welcome everybody to this PayTrace Power 30. My name is Sam Johnson. I am the sales trainer at PayTrace. With us is our special guest, Mr. Jeff Schneider from Schneider Sales Training. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Team, I want to give you a little bit of insight on what the Power 30 is so you know what to expect throughout this webinar. PayTrace Power 30 is our webinar series where we interview guests, sometimes PayTracers, sometimes some folks externally. And really what the goal of this is to give you some insight into the industry, into some best practices that you can use to create some success for yourself. These are pretty quick. We're going to get through this in about half an hour, more give or take a couple minutes. And you are muted. It doesn't mean that we want to discourage dialogue. We just want to keep this flowing. If you have questions, comments, emotional outbursts throughout this call, open up the Q&A box on your Zoom window. Send it in. I will be monitoring that, and we'll take about 5 minutes towards the end to tackle some of those questions. So if that sounds good, let's talk about our guest, Jeff. Jeff, you are the president of Schneider Sales Training, which is a branch of Sandler Sales Training. Do you mind just giving us a quick background into yourself and what it is that you do?
Yeah, so I'm a Sandler franchisee. Sandler is probably the world's largest sales training organization. We're, 150, 170 locations, 30 countries. Almost every major North American city has a Sandler franchise. I'm based here in Portland, Oregon, with the Columbia River behind me today. Been doing this for 15 years and love training, coaching, and mentoring salespeople.
And what's really cool about having you on this, Jeff, is that you are actually a trainer / mentor to the PayTrace team.
That's right.
We've worked with you extensively pre-pandemic and even a little bit remotely. And I can say, personally, to add some credibility to this, I think our team has found a lot of value working with you. And you've taught us all things like not to paint seagulls and not to spill your candy in the lobby.
Right.
And
that's right.
All sorts of things that mean nothing to anybody on here.
Yeah, but I'll explain it if people want to know. It's always a pleasure to work with you and your team.
That's awesome. Well, Jeff, so the topic today that we're going to get into is talking about traits of successful salespeople. And I got to ask you up front, do you have experience in the payment industry?
A little bit, yeah. I've worked with, obviously, you guys, and I've worked with some merchant processors over the years as well. I did a big kickoff for one of the largest companies here in Portland a number of years ago, probably 40 reps. And I love the merchant industry because it's sales. I mean, there are a lot of sales positions where it's like, what's kind of sales, sort of? Merchant sales is sales.
And what I like about what you bring to the table is that you've worked with a lot of payments folks, but you're not a payments guy. You're just a very knowledgeable salesperson. So I like that you can kind of take what we talk about here and repurpose it to a lot of different things. So I'm excited to hear about the traits. I want to, before we get into the bulk of this presentation or conversation, I want to ask the audience, guys, if you wouldn't mind opening up that Q&A box. But when it comes to payments, or not payments, when it comes to successful salespeople, what do you think is the most important trait of a salesperson, right? Is it, for example, drive? Is it...
they have to come up with it themselves.
They need to come up. Yeah, I've just throw out some examples. All right. I see honesty. I see...
I want to hear what they come up with without any input. I'm really curious.
I know. I'm not good. I'm stalling. Persistence, attitude, consistency, authenticity. I want to see if any of the traits will actually pop up in here. Listening skills.
Good at telling jokes.
Trust, joke telling. I hope you get into that extensively because my joke telling is lacking.
I will not.
Positive affirmation. Doug, I like it.
I like that
too.
All
right. Well, let's build off of this. Jeff, I know that you've worked with a lot of sales folks and you know some really important traits and can kind of articulate some of those. What do you see as really some of the most successful traits?
Yeah, let's take these in order. The first one I'm going to mention is ambition. And I mention ambition because everything I've read on the topic says that the best predictor of success in salespeople, sales managers, and entrepreneurs is ambition and drive. I've been using assessment tools, empirical assessment tools for the 15 years that I've been doing this Sandler gig. And I've helped lots and lots of companies hire salespeople. And one of the assessment tools looks at 33 traits necessary for success. And if I've got 10 seconds to look at a sales candidate's profile, I want to see ambition and drive. Because when ambition and drive is in the upper 75th percentile, they're going to find a way to win, right? They have a big why, a big burning drive inside of them. When it's beneath 25%, it's a dog that can't hunt. There's all kinds of tactics we can teach them, but it is unlikely. Sales is hard, right? So part of what I do with people is therapy. I help them understand sales, particularly prospecting. It's hard. People go, you drive a nice car and you wine and dine people. That's easy. No, you put up with rejection day in and day out. And so it's important that you know why you're doing this, because the process of selling is not always pleasant. The outcomes of selling can be extremely pleasant. And so I've found ambition and money motivation tend to be the two top predictors. And so if people are driven by both of those, they're likely to be successful at sales. If they just have one, right? And money motivation doesn't necessarily mean that they're greedy or they're materialistic. I was a manager of a group of radio stations here in Portland. My two top reps, one of them, both middle-aged guys, they had families of 4 and 6 children each. They just need to make 6 figures. They're going to make it, right? And so those, I would say, are the traits that jump out at me first.
Yeah, that's interesting. To add my own perspective on that, when I used to sell in sports, I was not money motivated because, I wasn't making much money and I didn't need it at the time, but I was motivated by the fact that we had all these contests and competitions between all of my peers across the country. I always like seeing my name up there in the top 3.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I get that completely. I'm curious, that was kind of my goal when I was kind of doing my entry level sales, but for others, how do you feel goals really plays into ambition?
Goals are really important. Right? Goals and ambition are so closely aligned with each other. And when we have emotionally compelling goals, we tend to find ways to make things happen. Goals do some things for us as salespeople. When we know what we want, we can typically find a way to be able to accomplish it. So goals create energy, right? Sales can be exhausting at times, getting up and calling people endlessly on the phone and dealing with voicemail and rejection and everything else. But when you have a big goal, it allows us to find ways to accomplish things. So Stephen Covey says, successful people are in the habit of doing things that unsuccessful people don't like to do. And they don't like doing it either, he said, but their disliking is subordinated to the strength of their purpose. Another thing that goals do for us is they open up what's called the reticular activating system in our brain. That's the part of our brain that's filtering out extraneous information, right? The vast majority of sensory cues coming at you, visually, auditory, any given day are not processed by your brain because they're deemed to be irrelevant based upon your paradigm, your experiences, your beliefs, and your goals. So when you set a goal for yourself, when you say, I want to buy a second home, I want to have a boat, I want to have X amount of dollars in my retirement account, all of a sudden your brain says this information is relevant and you start to see and hear things that were always there that you were blind to previously. It's a phenomenon, right? And so when we set a real goal and we step over the line and we say, I want this, all of a sudden we begin to see opportunities that were always there that we perceived to be impossible or implausible previously. Goals change things, and highly ambitious people are goal-oriented. And that's, when I'm interviewing a sales rep, that's one of my big questions. Tell me about your goals. And they'll say, you mean personal, professional? I'm like, yep.
Everything. Do you have goals?
Tell me what you want. And I love it when they go, I want to make money. I'm like, good. It's not greed is good. It's just, I want clarity around what it is that you're trying to accomplish. When it is clear, I feel like I can bet on that person.
Sure. I like that because I think ambition sometimes has that little bit of negative connotation with it. But when you relate it to sales, you want to have goals. And I think that's a good way to combine the two.
Yeah.
So ambition, I think we've covered that. I feel like I got a little bit of a science lesson in that. What would you say the next one would be?
Persistence.
Okay.
By the way, these 5, they're in no order. Well, ambition is number 1. That one's always going to be number 1 for me.
Okay.
But the rest of these are not in an order, and they're somewhat arbitrary. I mean, I'm not saying mine are right and yours are wrong, right? But I think persistence is really important for a salesperson.
Sure.
Again, I've interviewed and hired a lot of salespeople over the years, and there are many that do well for a month or two. They have the right attitude, they're doing the right behavior, and then they just kind of flame out. It gets hard. And so sales is a lot like agriculture, right? You have to till the soil, you have to plant the seed, you have to nurture it, and you have to wait, and then you have to go do it again. And there is a need to, in Sandler, we call it do the behavior. Just continue to do the behavior. Put together what we call a cookbook, a behavioral plan of I'm going to do X amount of cold calls. I'm going to send out X amount of emails. I'm going to send out X amount of LinkedIn invites. I'm going to do X amount of webinars. I'm going to send handwritten notes. And you put together this document and you simply do the behavior every single day, whether you feel like it or not. One of our Sandler rules goes like this. It's not how you feel that determines how you act. It's how you act that determines how you feel. Right. So we're all about actions and activities and behaviors. And, you know, successful people who are persistent block out time in their schedules on a daily basis. I was the sales rep at Creme 2 in Spokane, right, where you're at right now. Yeah, I worked there for a number of years and got promoted into sales management. My manager took me aside one day and she said, Jeff, do you know what makes you the best rep here? And I said, no. And she said, you do something the other reps don't do. And I said, what's that? She said, I've noticed every week you block out time in your calendar every day for prospecting. I said, so? And she said, the other reps don't do it. I said, well, then how do they find time to prospect? That's what to me, it was so simple, but it's that persistence at doing the behavior week in, week out, and tracking the activity and the progress.
Okay. I'm curious, Jeff, do you find, so one thing that I always found as kind of an issue was burnout. I feel like I would do a lot of activities. And do you feel like kind of having a plan and a schedule, does that help or mitigate that at all?
It does, because I am committed to doing the behavior that I have agreed to do, either with somebody else. Ideally, they have an accountability partner, or with myself. You know, I quote Stephen Covey a lot. I'm a big fan of the 7 Habits. He said, you know, the essence of successful people is that they're in the habit of making and keeping commitments with other people. But before they can consistently do that, they have to be in the habit of making and keeping commitments with themselves. Sure. So it's a matter of saying, I'll make my bed this morning. I will exercise this afternoon. I will make 10 cold calls today. And nobody's looking, but I'm counting, right? I have a little tick sheet and it's 1, 2. I feel good about myself when I get to 10. I go, good, check it off, move on to the next one. And it's a consistent, persistent doing of behaviors that always eventually leads to success.
And one thing I really like about what you're mentioning, Jeff, is that when it comes to persistency, you're not talking about in the lens of constantly contacting the same people over and over again, being, you know, sales persistent, but really just persistent in your own activities, your own behaviors, your own progress. I think there's a distinction there.
Yeah. And, you know, success is not just success in sales or success in business. It is, let's just call it self-mastery.
Sure.
I'm in control of myself. I'm in control of my thoughts. I'm in control of my emotions. I'm in control of my actions. And I set a plan in the morning, and to the best of my ability, I feel good at the end of the day to the extent where I made progress towards my emotionally compelling goals. It always starts with goals and ambition.
Yep.
Right. And now we're executing on that goal and ambition every single day. On days where I feel like I did not make progress and I was not disciplined and persistent towards doing these things, it's hard to feel good about myself because I said something's important to me and I didn't do enough today about it. So it's that commitment to here's what I plan on doing and executing it and not letting the distractions stop me from doing it. Another way of putting it is big rocks first. I know what my big rocks are. It's prospecting. I will do that, and maybe not some other things, but this is most important.
Right, exactly. And David here in the comments mentions persistence. It's a relentless pursuit of your best work and goals. David, I love it. Appreciate the insight on that.
Good,
just in the essence of keeping this moving forward, I want to make sure we cover all 5 of these. What's the next one up on the list?
I think highly effective salespeople are strategic in their approach.
Okay.
They're strategic because they're being intelligent about the way they go about selling. So yeah, they're ambitious and they're persistent, but they're putting thought into it. They have a plan for achieving their goals. So they start with, I want to have $1 million, let's say, right, in my bank account, just a random big number.
Sure.
Then they say, how am I going to get there? Well, I'm going to put 50,000 a year in and it's going to grow. Okay, well, how am I going to get 50,000 more a year to do that? Well, I have to make 50,000 more in income. How am I going to, it's backwards logic. I have to close more business. I have to put more proposals out. I have to have more first meetings. I have to have more prospect. I have to improve my skill sets in each of these ways to create those ratios. But successful salespeople have a business plan. They see themselves running a business, and this business is one that they're in charge of. And they have a plan. They have a plan for growing their territory. At least once a year, they sit down and they say, what is my plan to grow my territory? And there's 4 different ways to do that. I can sell more of the same stuff to the same people. I can sell new stuff to the same people. I can sell stuff to new people, new logos, and I can raise my prices. And they're strategic, looking at all 4 of those elements. They have a plan for growing each account, right? And maybe they divide it into A's and B's and C's. I'm going to spend this much time with these guys, and here's what I'm going to do over here. They're strategic, not random in the way they go about doing it. They even have a strategic plan for accessing high-level decision makers because they know how important that is.
Right. Well, I'm wondering, in the lens of PayTrace, to kind of bring this back to our solution, we work a lot with, B2B companies. That's really our bread and butter within our gateway solution. I feel like there's an essence of strategy with that, right? Targeting specific types of companies and industries to work with rather than what I like to call like the shotgun approach. What are your thoughts on that?
It's critical. It's critical. I mean, I was a marketing student down at San Diego State, and certain things really stuck with me. 2 of the things that stuck with me are USPs and ICPs. USP is a unique selling proposition. You're not right for everybody. So what is it that you do better than your competition? It's not everything. It's 1 or 2 things that you have built your brand around. And then who needs your USP? That's your ICP, your ideal client profile, right? The traits and characteristics of those clients that are right smack dab in the center of your bullseye. It doesn't mean you only work with those companies. It means that you're focused on spending time, effort, and money to market to those companies, to build products for those companies, to innovate for those companies, and to reach out and initiate conversations to those companies. By the way, if people want to see my ICP document, they can send me an email, jeffs@sandler.com, and I'll send it out to them, along with a sheet on how to create your own ICP.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. And I think PayTrace, we kind of make that easy as our technology, really, right? Our USP is really the fact that we automize level 3 interchange. And I think our ICP is really anybody that takes a lot of these business to business cards, right?
Yep.
I'd be interested to maybe break that down. If anybody is interested in diving into that, maybe what our take, and I'd like to maybe throw Eric Jenks under the bus, because I think he's put some thought into that as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting way to look at things. I know a lot of people on here have a lot of different access to products and solutions, but definitely being strategic about what you do and how you use it is pretty important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So what do we got? We had ambitious, persistent, strategic. Number 4.
Curious.
Okay.
Curious. This one really gets to the Sandler philosophy. Selling is not telling. Selling is not pitching. Selling's not coming up with a great PowerPoint. Selling really isn't even convincing people to buy something that they don't think that they need. Selling is asking great questions and listening. It's showing up and trying to understand the prospect's pain, right? And if they have pain, then we really should continue talking. And if they don't, then it's probably going to be a disqualified opportunity. But I think great salespeople love to learn. They're continuous learners. They have what Carol Dweck at Stanford called a growth mindset. They know that there's always more for them to explore and to learn. They're students of human psychology, human behavior. They want to know the truth. Successful people and salespeople in particular, they operate in reality. They're not fooling themselves. They want to know exactly what is taking place in their client's world I think even more importantly, they want feedback. They want to know what they can do better. And so they have candid relationships with their managers and their sales trainers to say, how can I get better at what I do? In other words, they embrace their ignorance. They understand there's so much that I don't know that I am working all the time to ask great questions of everybody around me. I call it pushing HTML hyperlinks, right? They listen, they hear something, they go, what do you mean? Tell me more about that. And they're constantly just curious about other people. And that level of interest makes them interesting.
Yeah. It's funny because as you're saying this, I'm reflecting on all the trainings that I've had with you. All the time. We're talking about some sort of topic or something, that a challenge that we're trying to overcome. And just the simple question, well, tell me more about that.
Yep.
It's like, oh man, now I got to think. And it really does help out a ton when you just ask some very, curiosity types of questions. So
right.
I want to bring that in. What I'm hearing, and this might be a little disruptive to some people on this call, but is it fair to say that maybe the lesser successful sales folks that you see are doing more of the pitch and present style as opposed to the...
Absolutely. We have something called the 70-30 rule in Sandler. It says your job is to talk 30% of the time, listen 70% of the time. In order for that to happen, you've got to really open up your ears. You have to ask lots of questions, but you have to have a fundamental change in belief. And that belief is that, Sam, if you're the prospect, what you have to say is more important than what I have to say. Right? I'm not here to educate you, to tell you things you don't know. I'm here to ask you questions so you can help me understand what it is that you need, and I can see if I can craft a solution to help you get what you need. But in Sandler, we really believe that our skill set is all about asking questions, listening. Sometimes when I get asked a question, I reverse that question. That's an interesting question I want to answer, but help me understand why this is important, right? Because there's still more that I need to understand. And we use something called third-party stories, in which we talk about other people and the situations that they've experienced. Is it possible that that's what you're experiencing right now? But these are the things we work on because it allows us to become trusted advisors. That's really the goal here, is that they trust us because they know we're genuinely interested in them.
I can definitely appreciate that. I know personally a lot of sales that have probably fallen through because I feel like I'm dictating the conversation and I'm telling people what they need versus right asking them what they need and uncovering that pain. So
yeah,
I think that's awesome. Last one. We're on number 5.
Here we go. They're confident. This one goes without saying. And yet I think a legitimate question is, well, where does confidence come from? We know it when we see it. And I'm talking about real confidence, not bravado, not arrogance, not some false persona where somebody's, trying to pretend like they're confident. I'm just talking about somebody who's comfortable in their skin, who shows up feeling like, I belong here. We call it equal business stature in Sandler. Equal business stature. I'm not better than you. I'm not worse than you. I belong here. The questions that I have to ask are important. I trust myself, right? And so where does this come from? Well, we work on this a lot. We have some rules that we kind of live by. One of them is I'm independently wealthy and I don't need the business, which sounds very tongue-in-cheek when you first hear it. What does that mean? Well, I like to ask people, what would it be like if you had $20 million in your bank account? And the way you would sell with 20 million is the way that you should sell today. You'd be more selective. You get to the point. You would disqualify people. You wouldn't be desperate. You would do the right thing. And you'd probably speak the truth more, right? So that's the sort of, we call it being an I-10. Our identity is a 10. Even if our role performance is not, I still feel good about me. I think those are the people that attract clients to themselves.
I like that. I'd say maybe to expand on that, what would you say some of the different markers of a highly confident person are, right? 20 million in the bank. What does that actually look like when you're having those conversations?
Yeah, I think that real quickly, some of the markers include they're unapologetic about the questions that they ask. They're assertive in nature. They set what we call upfront contracts. They take control of the meeting at the start for the benefit of the other person, saying things like, can we talk about our agenda? Can I share with you my goal for the meeting? They suggest what outcomes there might be at the end of the meeting. They make it really easy for the prospect to say no, right? I'll say things like, look, maybe there isn't a good fit, Sam. Maybe your company is perfectly fine doing what it's doing right now, and this isn't the time to look into sales training. That's not a manipulative statement, right? But it's not a statement that a desperate salesperson who needs to close something this week can say. It's something that $20 million in the bank helps you to be able to say and mean it. And it differentiates you from all the other desperate salespeople out there.
Right. I think that's very interesting. It's almost like an attitude adjustment.
It is.
And I think that's super valid. There's a comment in the Q&A that I really want to address right now. And team, if you have questions or comments for Jeff or myself, please take the time now because we're coming up on the end. But I did want to address this. One of my peers, David, who's also a sales trainer, is on this call. And David, I owe you a follow-up here shortly. But I think with confidence comes this idea of fear. And David does a really great job. He uses fear as an acronym on how fear means forget everything and run. And he says that we often allow fear to infuse itself into your trajectory, which is bad. But I really appreciate this, David, and thank you for sharing. But he has a new definition of fear, which is face everything and rise.
Love it.
I think that's awesome. This helps us take the charge of external forces and factors that normally we allow to control us, and it gives us complete control and freedom from the old fear to embrace the new.
That's cool. That's cool. I want to add on to that because I really like that, David. Confidence is not the absence of fear, right? There's still fear. I mean, I get tense, I sweat, but I remind myself that in the physical neurochemistry going through my body, that the sensation of anxiety or nervousness is very similar chemically to excitement. And so I can just reinterpret it as excitement and anticipation. And by simply changing my paradigm, be able to use that as opposed to have it, debilitate me.
I'll be honest, every time I hop onto one of these webinars, I get a little bit of fear, but I kind of use that to get the energy going, right? And I think that plays into a question that just came in from Barry. How do you show confidence without appearing arrogant?
I think confidence is real, and it's calmness. It is a willingness to, if you're trying to display confidence, it probably is going to backfire. When you're really confident, it doesn't have to be about you. And keep in mind, our selling system is about asking questions. I'm not trying to find the limelight. I'm not trying to prove I'm smart. I'm confident in that I'm asking you questions and I'm taking control. The person who is asking the questions is in control, confidently in control of the conversation. And it makes the other person be the person in the spotlight. A good talk show host is a really good metaphor for what a good sales call should be like.
I like that quite a bit. Well, I really appreciate the dialogue on here, Jeff and team. Thank you for the commentary. We have time for one more question, and then let's get into maybe a call to action or two. How do you learn from Melina? How do you learn to how to make a practice sheet for good phrases, selling points, questions to act?
Good practice sheet. So I'm a big advocate of scripting. I think all professionals who are really good at what they do are well scripted. Scripting is always situational, though. So I would say that, you could look at it in a linear fashion. You got to prospect first. So you have to have some kind of a script for what you're going to say on the phone. And once you get to and you have to get past the gatekeeper before you even get the person on the phone. All of these require a script. Then you're going to get objections, and you need to script out how you're going to handle those objections. Eventually you get the appointment. Now you have to script out what you're going to do in the first 5 minutes. And then you keep, it's linear, right? It's like a factory. We're removing bottlenecks. It's difficult to get into the micro details other than to say clients who really want to master all that I put him in a 2-year program, and we're talking twice a week for 2 years. That's how much work there is in coming up with all of that scripting.
It's a big deal though, right? It can make a big difference.
It's important.
Really quick, we talked about these different traits of being successful, and I like, Jeff, that you elaborated on a lot of them and actually added some calls to action to each of those. What are some ways that we can improve ourselves? I want to ask just the audience, a little self-reflecting of these 5 traits, which do you feel like you have the most area of self-improvement on? Is it that ambition, the persistency, strategic, right? Curiosity, confidence? Really curious to see what the response is here. I know personally for me, I think probably strategic. Actually, no, I'd say persistency. One of my flaws is organization, I feel like, and just needing to get a little bit more persistent with how I approach, all of my tasks and goals. So Jeff, I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, you have me thinking now too. I think persistence and strategic are probably the 2 I need to improve at the most as well.
Love it. And to be honest, it's a pretty 20% split across the board. So I think that's really cool.
It is.
You can see that there's always gaps for everybody, and it's always different. So Jeff, I appreciate your time here today. You mentioned it earlier, but if somebody wanted to follow up with you to get maybe some of those resources that you had, or to chat with you about sales training, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
You can email me, jeffs@sandler.com, just like Adam Sandler. You can go out to my website, schneider.sandler.com. I have lots of white papers and videos and resources out there. You can also go out to YouTube and just search for Jeff Schneider Sandler Training. I have a couple hundred videos out there, 3 to 5 minute videos on related topics.
I will say I follow Jeff on LinkedIn, and Jeff's always posting new content, short videos, and a lot of free materials that you can take advantage of. So I'd recommend, taking some time to look that up. You might find
Send me out a LinkedIn invite. I'm happy to accept it, guys.
For sure. And then just to call out, guys, this was the 3rd course of our series on growing your portfolio from 100K to $1 million. We did have a few conversations earlier with some other sales experts, payment experts, Roger McNamara and James Shepard. If you are interested in checking those out, right, these are all intended to be resources for you to grow as a professional. Those are also on PayTrace's YouTube channel. And we're more than happy to follow up with some resources if you request them. You can get a hold of us at sales@paytrace.com. Jeff, again, thank you so much, man. It's always a pleasure working with you, and I'm glad you didn't reverse too many questions on me today. So thanks again.
Thanks for having me, Sam. It was a lot of fun. Thanks everybody for tuning in today. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Yeah.